The easiest way to reduce your taxes is not buying a bunch of stuff and taking tax deductions, stockpiling paper clips on December 31st, or contributing money to retirement accounts like IRAs. Today I'm going to tell you the easiest way to dramatically reduce your taxes, get out of the matrix, and actually keep more of your own money. So unless it's your first time here, you know that my answer to dramatically reducing your taxes is to go overseas, to go where you're treated best, where you can choose your own tax rate and you don't have to worry about what your country's doing and their craziness. Yes, even if you're an American. But today I'm going to tell you some things that I've seen in the news recently that make me want to remind you the proper way to do this and how to make sure that you can keep your easy tax savings long term. If it is your first time here, I'm Andrew Henderson. I'm the founder of Nomad Capitalist. We're a boutique consulting firm that helps 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best, lower taxes, more personal freedom, more options because the world is crazy and you don't want to just have one. You can go to nomadcapitalist.com and learn more. And so what I've been seeing in the news a couple times recently from the UK is that HMRC, the tax authority there, is sending out so-called nudge letters to folks who have undeclared different accounts that they should have declared and who have undeclared foreign corporations. So a nudge letter is basically like, hey, we're on to you, and you never know what could happen next, and so people better come forward and take care of that. You're seeing that in more Western countries. Obviously, the U.S. is staffing up the IRS, and they're looking to go after wealthy folks. And so you may have a requirement to report your foreign bank accounts, foreign corporations. We suggest that you do all those things, and so you need to have an international-focused tax expert to help you do that because domestic tax experts generally don't know. And so if you want to make sure that you can reduce your taxes without getting a nudge letter, without getting audited, without getting into some problems, then you want to find a sustainable way to reduce taxes. And for me, that means making a change. You've got to decide, right, out of 252 countries and territories in the world, is yours the only that you can stand to live in? I get it, you get kids in high school. Guess what? They've got schools everywhere. They've got schools in lots of places around the world. And would your kids rather have an adventure and learn how the world works and learn a different language and meet different people and have more money for their inheritance or more money for you to spend on them, whatever, or would they rather stay in the country? Listen, there's no right or wrong answer, but if you want to reduce your taxes beyond just, trying to buy a bunch of marketing services for your business on December 31st and like writing it off, which by the way, in a lot of countries, you're not even supposed to do. You're supposed to allocate like where it goes. Then you need to not only move your assets overseas, but you need to move your, and so people think like, hey, I'll set up my company overseas and I will just go to a board meeting every year in Belize, and that'll be all that's needed to reduce taxes. But what Western countries do is they have all kinds of different rules, like where the minded management is, where the permanent establishment is, where the trade and business is, all kinds of different names for saying if you're working in your business, if you have employees working in your business, which even if you go offshore, you leave a whole bunch of employees, that needs to be planned around. Then we're going to tax you for where the work is being done, right? And so people watch like the global minimum tax, and they're saying, oh, well, these companies, big companies, tech companies, are going to start to be taxed, somewhere in the world because they've basically been saying, hey, we're based here in this low tax jurisdiction, and yet we sell all over the world. That doesn't really necessarily apply to you. Number one, the global minimum tax is not going to apply to almost anyone who's watching this as business. But your situation is as a smaller business following my tax-friendly quadrant, as I call it. And so chances are the easiest way to reduce your taxes is to physically move, not just to move the corporation, not just to move the bank account, but to actually move. Because if you're living in a high-tax Western country, there's a very low chance that simply not bringing the money back into the country is going to save you on taxes. So the misconceptions are, I can set up my corporation overseas in a zero-tax jurisdiction, and if I just do something to nominally interact with that company, that'll save me money. Doesn't work, right? What's the ownership? Where's the work being done? That's what's going to overrule it. Nothing wrong with having an offshore company, by the way, just paying full boat taxes and enjoying asset protection benefits. Maybe it helps run your business more easily, depending on where you're doing business. Certainly in some countries, have a client right now. He lives in a place, multi-million-dollar business. He says, yeah, my country, nobody wants to send money to my country, right? He's like, I'm happy to pay taxes here, but I'm incorporating somewhere else so my clients can pay me, right? And so not necessarily the case if you're in the U.S., for example, but maybe the case for somebody. And so if you're willing to move, you're going to open up all the opportunities of my tax-friendly quadrant, which is you, right? Where are you the owner? And if there's multiple owners, multiple people working the business, they may be factored in as well. but where are you going to be leaving and where are you going to be arriving, and where's your company going to be leaving, where's your company going to be arriving? So if we look at your part of the equation, the easiest way to reduce your taxes is for you to physically move. Now, if you're an American, you are still subject to pay tax no matter where you move in the world. However, you have the foreign earned income exclusion for any salary you take out of the business, depending on the ownership structure of the business. Let's say if you have partners, you may be able to reduce the tax on the entire business to zero. If not, you may reduce it to some percentage that's in the single or low double digits. And so certainly the U.S. Focuses more on tax deferral than entire tax savings, which is why some people choose to expatriate from the United States. They don't have to pay on an ongoing basis. But you can still dramatically reduce your taxes as an American. Pretty much everybody else, at least for the time being, you can simply become what's called a tax non-resident of your country. You can leave for tax purposes. And so if you're watching this from a Western country, chances are that means you're going to spend a relatively lesser amount of time in your country. People have heard the 183-day rule, and so that may work in a Colombia or a Montenegro. But for most Western countries, they're going to look at various different tests, like your center of life. And so here's a number. It's not tax advice. It's just a number based on certain countries that we work with. Let's call it 90 days a year. There's many different factors that can influence whether that 90 should be lower, whether it can be a little bit higher. But if you're coming from a Western country, you're not going to spend 6 months living in that country, period, right? So the easiest way to reduce your taxes is not just to move, but to actually move the majority of the time. I think people sometimes think like, I'll move to some other country one more day. Maybe if they have a tax treaty, you do a tiebreaker, like that can work, but it's just going to become a lot of hassle and a lot of risk. And so if you're living in a country and you want to be taxed non-resident, you're going to spend a substantially lesser amount of time in your country. You may be closing out assets in your country. You may be renting out your house. You may be closing your bank account. Every country has their own parameters and every person's situation is different. None of this is tax advice. But if you were out of your country and you're not an American, right? The way to be out of the United States, by the way, is you move to Puerto Rico under Act 60 or you expatriate and give up your citizenship. Everybody else can simply declare themselves tax non-resident, follow the proper procedures. There may or may not be an exit tax in your country. And so if you're building a business, if you're building a portfolio, it's always better to leave before those valuations get too high, because they can look at that and say, well, hey, okay, you have $8 million in unrealized capital gains. Hey, you can go and the next $80 million can be yours in Dubai. But the $8 million you owe us. You did that here, right? So before you leave and before you sign out, just write us a check. It's $2 million, it's $3 million, it's $4 million, whatever it is. But if you don't have that, well, that makes it harder. Some countries you can leave security, but you really want to be like, hey, here's all my stocks, like, So the easiest way is getting out before it's too late, before you have too much in assets. Now, if you sold your business for $100 million and then you want to leave, generally speaking, hey, you already paid tax on that, so it's not like you're going to pay an extra tax. But if you have unrealized capital gains from a business, from a portfolio, don't wait until you're on cloud nine with how much money you have to move. Move when you're almost like on pins and needles a little bit before it's too late. That's the easiest way, right? Don't make it hard on yourself where you have so much money and then you stop yourself. Like I see so many people where they have $10 million and to leave would cost them, $3 million. And they plan on getting into $50 million, and then so they forego the savings, or they debate whether they should forego the savings on the next $40 million, right? So at those percentages, it's another $12 million in savings, like generational wealth building opportunities, because they don't want to liquidate some stuff now and pay the 3 because they waited too long, right? We've had that with people who've come to us numerous times over the years where they keep hiring us, and it's like they're at 10, they're at 20, then they're at 50, and it's like, dude, you should have bit the bullet at 10. Right? If you couldn't bite it before that, bite it at 10 before you get to 50. And so basically, non-Americans, tax non-residents. You're leaving the country and you're going to have to cut some ties there. And so generally speaking, to leave, you need to actually leave. It shouldn't be like, well, I'm just pretending to leave. Sometimes people say, oh, I'll move to Puerto Rico, but can I get like a cigarette boat and like come back to Miami? Stop. Put in the actual work, right? Like, if you're European, actually move to another country. Actually spend your time somewhere else. And so once you do that, whether you're living in Puerto Rico as an American, in which case you're setting up your business in Puerto Rico, you're setting up your portfolio in Puerto Rico, and you're just kind of separate from the U.S. system, or if you're expatriating, okay, again, for Americans. Otherwise, once you've just moved out of your country and you've activated these tax incentives, then it's like, okay, I live in a place where they don't tax me, or they don't tax my foreign investments, or they only tax me a flat amount and I can do whatever else I want, or they only tax the money I bring into the country. When you go to other countries, you can take advantage of those incentives. Unless your country is a tax-free country, you're probably not going to have that incentive. right? And so you have to go somewhere else to do that. Once that happens, let's say you set up shop living in Thailand. You put your company in the UAE. One's personal tax friendly, one's business tax friendly. And so now because they both are tax friendly, that works. Unlike when you say, oh, I live in Canada, my company's in the UAE. Well, that's going to butt because Canada's going to say, well, great, but you live here. You have to pay us. And so again, the point is moving. Anyone can set up tax-free companies, right? But the point is moving to a place. There are dozens of places in the world where you can get dramatically lower tax rates. Now, if you don't want to live in one place full-time, potentially you could follow, let's say, my trifecta approach. You'll still want to have a tax home somewhere that you could maybe pay. There are countries where you pay them some small amount and they just, hey, you're a tax resident, spend 30 days a year, spend 14 days a year, spend 1 day a year, whatever. Okay, you're a tax resident. That helps you function in the world. And so if you want to live in different places, you still want to have a tax home in most cases. Not giving you tax advice, but that's just generally what we find. But you can move around. And so there are certain countries that are not Western countries where they may have a strict 183-day rule. And so if you're there 4 months, then you may not have to pay them any tax. And so you could do that, over a number of different places. But for a lot of folks who just want to live in one place, or they want to live in one place the majority of the time, you will be deemed a tax resident. And so if you're a tax resident in a country that doesn't tax you, or that puts a cap on how much you're taxed, or again, it's a flat amount, whatever, or the amount that you can control, then that's when you're going to have the ability to say, okay, great, now let me put my company in the UAE. So if you're like part of a non-dom tax system, you can generally then go and put your company in the Cayman Islands, the UAE. They won't bother you. And so as long as you pay them the small amount you've agreed to, or that you have to based on remittance, then you're going to save. So the one kind of unifying theme in all this is you're moving. Moving your assets isn't enough. Moving your tukas is what you generally need to do. Now, if you have a huge company, you can be more sophisticated with it, sure. But for the average person who is the sole shareholder or one of two shareholders of their company, for the person who has just kind of a normal business, your moving is going to be the impetus of what actually solves things. And so most folks that we see can save, as an outcome of that, 80 to 100% of their tax bill. Okay, some people choose to live in Europe, and so it's really more difficult to just pay 0,000 in Europe. But if you prefer living in Europe, if you like the idea of working towards citizenship, if you just like the lifestyle, whatever, you can pay some much lesser amount. So maybe your tax rate goes from 40 to 8, or from 45 to 5, or whatever the case may be. And you're in control. You get to choose the tax rate. Some folks move to situations where, again, a tax-free country or a territorial tax country where you can pay literally zero across the board, and so they're saving 100% of their tax bill. But the point is by moving, and by moving properly, by being properly tax non-resident in your country, by being properly expatriated, by being properly living somewhere else, whether it's Puerto Rico or whatever the case may be, you're going to have the peace of mind of knowing that you're doing it properly. So this video is not enough alone. Certainly we help people all the time with our network of accountants and attorneys all around the world put the pieces together on a holistic level to make sure what you're doing in the United States matches what you're doing over here, what you're doing in Canada matches what you're doing over there. And so that's what we do with the people that we work with. But what the point is peace of mind. You want to do it properly. You want to do it legally. If you're an American, there's still going to be things to file for your foreign corporations, foreign bank accounts. You should do that, right? And that's where you want the international tax experts to help you, because the international folks that we work with are very well aware of FBARs and Form 5471 and all of that, whereas most domestic folks are not. Move yourself, open up your opportunities. It is an adventure. I think you'll have a lot more freedom if you choose the right place. You'll have a better lifestyle. You'll have a lower cost of living. You can get a new citizenship in the process. There's so many benefits of doing this. There's really not a lot of downsides when you actually realize that life isn't that much different in so many other places. And it's going to be the impetus to you reducing your taxes in a dramatic way, not just about doing things inorganically to shift taxes to the future, but about actual sustainable, long-lasting tax savings that you can put that money back in your pocket, grow your business, and grow your wealth.